When I say tabletop games, what comes to mind? Is it a piece of cardboard that gets your family angry at you when you build a hotel on Parkway Avenue? Or is it a card that you slam down and screen Uno? Or is it a storyteller guiding players throughout a world that they created, fighting beasts, monsters, and other players? What I'm talking about is Dungeons & Dragons. Yeah, you can be playing the board games that you've been playing for years, or you can move on to video games, or you can just drop games in general. Or, what if I told you there was a game that brought storytellers together and people who just love having a good time with a group of friends? This game, of course, I'm talking about D&D. There's other games like this, tabletop role-playing games, like Cyberpunk or Pathfinder, and many others out there. But the one I want to focus on right now is Dungeons & Dragons. It's a game that I've been getting into for a couple years now, and I didn't really know too much going into it, but once I started playing, I started learning alongside it. But I also started having a lot more fun with the group and bonding with them even more. It might seem intimidating going into it because there's a lot of numbers and books that you have to read to start understanding the mechanics of the game, but I assure you that playing with friends and having a good group to be with can make it worthwhile. Even after all these years of playing, I'm still learning more and more, and I'm having a lot more fun after every session. The one thing I wish I knew going into it was how easy it was to start playing and having fun with others. Now, without further ado, let's get into the story. Dungeons & Dragons is a popular tabletop role-playing game that relies on a group of players to go up against the Dungeon Master. The Dungeon Master controls the story and is a leading part of what happens in the main game. But while they create the map and the story, the group of players ultimately decide what can happen to them, and this is a big reason why people like to play Dungeons & Dragons. My name's Max Brummer, and I'm going to be talking about why I love D&D, the history behind it, and the social aspects that come with playing the game. I've been in 2 campaigns for the last 2.5 years, and following the stories my Dungeon Masters have written, I've realized how different a campaign can be. While one campaign can be run by a Dungeon Master who strictly follows the rules of the book to support their gameplay, another campaign can be run by a storyteller who relies on the social aspect of the group to roleplay and enhance their story. Before we talk more about how people play the game, let's talk about the history of how it was made and why it got so popular. Dungeons & Dragons is usually referred to as D&D and was created by Gary Gygax and Dave Anderson back in 1974. In the early years of D&D, it was actually split into 2 systems, kind of like what I explained before, where there was an easy, less rule-heavy side of the game, and then there was a D&D, where it had a lot more rules and numbers alongside it. The game kept these 2 styles of play up until 1997, when Wizards of the Coast, a popular game publishing company, picked them up and made 3rd edition. When 3rd edition was made, they combined both of those rule sets into one streamlined game for everyone to play. They also integrated the D20 system, which is a 20-sided dice that calculated your chances of succeeding or failing any action in the game. D&D is currently at its 5th edition, and it's gotten more and more popular throughout the years. With the various forms of media becoming a lot more accessible to creators, it's been a lot easier to find D&D content throughout podcasts, TV shows, and animations. Since being named the biggest role-playing game in 2004, D&D has so many more ways of being played. You can either choose from a pre-made, fleshed-out campaign from online sources or the books themselves, or you can use the books to make your own. I've experienced both sides of D&D, where in our first campaign we lean more towards the roleplay and storytelling side, and in the second we lean more towards the rules and numbers side. I have to say, after the 2 years and 2 campaigns that I've played through, I really like the role-playing, storytelling, and social aspects of D&D. But the storytelling and the role-playing isn't for everybody. At cons like PAX Unplugged and other various Comic-Cons around the United States, there's actually competitive D&D that can be played. This competitive D&D is run by a various number of DMs, and they are given a set story to go by. And each character comes in, sits at a table, learns everyone's names, and they start playing. I think even when the game is more about the numbers and the strategies behind it, it becomes way more of a social game than any others that you can play. When you start bonding with the group and you start going through a story together, you start really getting into your character and getting into the story and the world that you're in. From what I've seen in the last couple of years that I've been playing, the community's been growing a lot recently. And I think it's really great to see how many people are wanting to get into the game and learn. There's a lot of tabletop games out there, and I think a lot of them are way too linear for a group to really play for long amounts of time. And I think D&D and Pathfinder and all the other RPGs really stick out and allow people to be as creative as possible. All you have to do is take your character sheet, a pencil, your friends, and go out and explore.